Going? Yeah. Okay. All right. Every year, the typical American family uses 18,000 kilowatt hours. This includes our appliances, our electronics, lights, everything. All right. The top three energy producers in America are coal plants, natural gas plants, and nuclear plants. Okay. A typical coal plant will produce 3.5 billion kilowatt hours per year, which is enough to power about 200,000 typical American homes. However, compare that to a nuclear plant, which produces 12.4 billion kilowatt hours per year, and this is enough to power about 700,000 homes. Nuclear energy has a negative connotation with most people. I know it did with myself before I did the research for this presentation. Of course, the first two things we'll think of probably are Chernobyl and more locally and recently TMI. However, in my research, I found that nuclear power actually does have a lot of benefits, and it's worth the risk because it's green, it can stimulate the economy, and it's a reliable energy source which we will be able to depend upon in the future. Possibly the most influential benefit of nuclear energy is how green it is. It's the most green energy source of the three leading energy producers in America, coal, natural gas, and nuclear plants. It produces 4 times the energy per year that a typical coal plant would, and coal plants are one of the worst polluters in the world, especially compared to nuclear power, which has 0 carbon emission once it's fully functioning. Coal power constitutes about 48.7% of the total energy consumed in the U.S., whereas nuclear power is about 19.7% of total energy consumed. And the ironic thing that I thought was interesting is that it costs the same per kilowatt hour. It's about 4 cents per kilowatt hour for both. I thought that was interesting because there's really no reason except for the assumed risks not to expand nuclear energy because it would be so much better for our environment. We also have to consider how the growing population will affect our environment. The greenhouse gas emissions will dramatically increase as the population rises and is consuming more of our natural resources. And because of that, there will be a higher demand for energy from coal and natural gas. However, if we expand nuclear power, we solve the problem of, well, not totally solve it, but we ease the problem of increasing greenhouse gas emissions. And we have to think here, it might be harder now, but we have to think of future generations. We have to think of our children and our grandchildren, who will ultimately be the ones who have to deal with this. Not only does nuclear power have the ability to protect the environment, but it also has the power to stimulate the American economy. Expanding nuclear energy would stimulate multiple aspects of the economy. For example, the manufacturing sector would grow, and not only would it grow, but it would grow up green, which means it would have an influence on other manufacturing centers to be greener as well because their energy source is green. And also another thing is that expanding nuclear power would create thousands of jobs. Currently there are 57,000 people in the U.S. employed by nuclear plants, and currently there are 17 companies which have proposed at least 26 more plants, and this would add 14 to 15,000 more jobs. And obviously we're in a recession. Our unemployment rates are much too high, and we could definitely not solve it obviously, but ease it with by adding more jobs. And also adding more people to the industry equals more ideas, which equals more brainstorming, which equals new technology, which will make nuclear power even more efficient. And not only can we depend on nuclear power to create jobs and stimulate the economy now, but we can also depend upon it in the future to do these things because it's so reliable. The magic number for a typical nuclear plant is 60 years. This means that's because most nuclear plants are contracted to run 60 years and then they'll shut down. The reason for this is that it's assumed at the end of the 60 years the nuclear plant will have very costly repairs, and it would be more economically sound to build new plants instead of repairing the ones they already have, actually. And until recently, this was the thought process. However, according to a report released in 2008 by the U.S. Department of Energy, the research and development for something called the Beyond 60 Years program has been increased dramatically. And this means that they're coming up with new ways and methods to repair currently functioning nuclear power plants at a much lower cost instead of having to build completely new ones. And another thing that people might say is bad about nuclear power is that it's no better than coal and natural gas because the uranium used in nuclear power is unrenewable. And this is true. However, new methods are being developed that are an alternative to uranium. For example, there's something called a light water reactor, which is cheaper, it's much easier to maintain, and obviously light and water are renewable resources. The alternatives will be discussed. Other alternatives will be discussed in more detail later in the presentation. But my point is that we can relax and we can depend upon nuclear power as an energy source. It's a new technology, but it does have lasting power, and adding even more technology at the rate the technology grows today will make nuclear power even more reliable. Nuclear energy really is more advantageous than other energy-producing materials. We live in one of the biggest energy consumers in the world, and the demand will only increase. The demand for energy will only increase as the population increases, and our rapid consumption of coal and natural gases will definitely hurt us in the long run, environmentally, economically, and it'll hurt the future. And we might not be around to have to clean it up, but like I said before, our children and grandchildren will be. It may appear that nuclear power is the highest risk, and it's true that nuclear power does have risks that others don't. But after doing my research for the presentation, I believe that the benefits make it worth the risk. It's safe for the environment, it creates thousands of jobs, and it has reliable, lasting power. It would definitely be beneficial for the U.S. and, for that matter, the entire world to expand nuclear power, and if not expand, to support the nuclear power that it currently uses. And I hope that my research and presentation has helped to convince you that this is true.